Perfect. Awesome. All right. So I think we look at this piece here. Well, why don't we just go through this real quick so we kind of have an idea what we're looking at when we're talking about priority area 1, housing access and navigation. So the first thing on here is landlord support. Offer a package of support and subsidies to landlords, include mitigation of risk to landlords without removing clients' responsibility, yet ensuring clients are protected. Avoid landlord incentives, which could drive up housing prices that are already very high. Support is an issue. Then we always talk about housing choices, like making sure our clients have options to get into decent and affordable housing. I know master lease has always been a topic of discussion over the years, and how do we potentially increase that, because that helps, gives us a little bit more control of the program itself. Data is another thing we always talk about, being something that is extremely important around what types of housing do we actually need for our system. And we've done some of this already in the NOFA work group, but we can talk a little bit more about that. And we always talk about the word affordable. What does that mean? Tim and I have been in discussions with some city departments around, or we've seen reports, we've shared reports that talk about what does affordable housing look like in Milwaukee, but how does that kind of reflect and relate to the work that we're doing. And then the last thing is advocacy. When we think about advocacy, we think about housing first, access to affordable housing, and how do we address that within our CoC, and knowing that there's also a statewide coalition, Housing First Coalition, doing some of that work. So why don't we start? Well, first of all, before we even get started and tackling the first piece of this, any questions from the group and how in this layout? And if we get through kind of these questions, we may not. I'm afraid we're not going to get through a lot of this just because of the timing. But any questions or thoughts before we even get started?
Just a quick question. Are we going to go through both categories or just the housing access category?
Just this housing access and navigation.
Okay.
Just this piece. Yeah. Any other thoughts? All right. So I guess we can we're just kind of get into the question and say, like, what's already happening, doing kind of an asset mapping of our system. And I think when we look at all of these specific areas of interest, there is something going on. There's some discussion. We have discussions at our meetings every month. There's some committees working on some of these things. Just from this group, what are you seeing as far as like what's already happening within the CoC around landlord support, knowing this as an extremely important component of our success within our CoC?
I can start. At Pathfinders, we have 2 and probably by sometime this year, 3 housing specialists. Those are in effect the case managers for our landlords. So their job is to be the point of contact for our existing network of landlords, to help recruit and maintain new landlords, to really do the housing side of supported housing. Mm-hmm. They work obviously very closely with our clients as well as our clients' case managers who do the supportive services. But they're the ones who navigate with landlords through the master leasing. We also have a sort of partnership agreement that we complete so that it's documented and signed by the landlord and by us as to mutual expectations and mutual obligations in this relationship. And then we have continued to try to build some less restrictive funding to allow us greater flexibility in making landlords whole when there are issues of anything that would, sort of go above and beyond the security deposit. That may be repairs or other items needing attention. We have found that for a lot of smaller landlords, they've been very short-staffed in some of their maintenance teams. And so we will, if needed, try to bring in somebody with a landlord's consent to take care of some of that. I mean, that's more expensive, but what we find is it's keeping good relationships with most of our landlords and keeping our young people housed and giving us, through the master lease, maximum flexibility of when a young person needs to move or we feel they need to move. We've got some greater latitude. Now that is offset by we don't have enough landlords and enough units, but at least the model is sort of addressing some of these issues.
How many staff you said, Tim?
We have 2 housing specialists currently. One is at a manager level, and then I think we're looking to add a 3rd member of that team sometime this year. Okay.
Now, do you find that within those housing specialists, so I think some of my previous discussions I've had with folks around this like topic or title is that there's like this, someone called it a landlord engagement specialist, and then the other title was a housing navigator. So there's one person that's focused strictly on recruiting landlords, and there's one person focused strictly on finding units. But is that kind of go hand in hand? Can when we look at the entire like system, like do we need folks to just focus just on landlords, or do we need people to focus just on finding units?
Yeah, I mean, that's a great question. I think there's probably some advantages in separating those 2 tasks out, but I think for us, there's been a real advantage in keeping them intact within each of our housing specialists, because the finding units and navigating the system and sort of getting locales and inspections, that's a very transactional thing, which is important, but I think that's harder to do if you don't also have somebody who's also building trust and communication and relationships with landlords. Now, maybe some of the bigger landlords aren't that interested in that, but we've really tried to steer away from the big dogs and just go with smaller landlords that have maybe less holdings, but more willingness to work directly with us.
Makes sense. Okay, thanks. Anybody else want to share as far as what they're currently doing?
So at Cathedral Center, we're doing similar work as to Pathfinders with a smaller group, with a smaller staff, a smaller team, and we're not as far developed in our process. But with the same objectives, working with a smaller landlord, supporting them, helping them with repairs if that's what needs to happen, doing a lot of relationship building. But we just promoted Genesee to be the person who oversees that process and supervises the community case managers. So we still need to fill her case manager position that she's trying to exit in order to really, dive into this process, but with all of the same things that Tim talked about.
Yeah, at Guest House, we're doing similar things. We have those fixed sites like Capuchin Prairie that we're in partnership with Heartland and Grandview. And so we provide, primarily case management services there. But then we also have the scattered sites, other programs where we're out there. We have a rental coordinator, one at this point, who works to kind of recruit landlords as well as find units. That person, along with case managers, so once a unit is found or a landlord, then it becomes more of a dual process of trying to build that relationship, take the client through the initial paperwork, the lease agreements and so forth. What, again, as Tim said, what will the landlord do and what will we be responsible for? So we're doing both. We could certainly use, obviously, probably a second full-time rental coordinator, and we could definitely use additional staff in finding units for the growth that keeps occurring.
Okay.
So I'll just add to what Michael had to say. In our site-based supportive housing, and we have, Heartland has 4 properties, totaling about 159 units of supportive housing site-based. We have some level of matching from the county for supportive services. In Prairie and Capuchin, where we're partnering with Michael and Guest House, we have no cash match and are depending wholly on donations to pay Guest House for their services. And then, well, not wholly, we get 13 grand from CDBG. And then in St. Anthony, we get a partial cash match, which is only about 1/3 of what social services cost in that building. And then the other 2/3 is donations. And then at Moscone for families, we have 0 funding for supportive services from public sources, and it's wholly dependent on donations and grants. So in all of those properties, we're struggling mightily with supportive services. But the other thing I wanted to add was we need to figure out how to provide the same landlord incentives to our site-based supportive housing that we would find in our scattered site. For instance, repair, damage, extermination, and security costs. We really need security at all of those properties, and it costs in the neighborhood of 200 grand a year. That there's no source for that. Rents do not cover it. And then as far as like extermination, repeated bed bug treatments, you all know a heat treatment is $1,000 a unit per treatment. And most of our units need multiple treatments per year, or not all of them, but many. So those kind of, matching landlord incentives in site-based with what we are able to offer in scattered site would help keep our site-based supportive housing cash flowing and at least breaking even.
That's a good point on the site-based location as far as a need for some flexible funds to do repairs.
And just pay for the services.
That too. Yes. Yeah. Yeah. I mean that also, when you look at site-based, you have 159 units. Making sure the case management, the ratio to case management is reasonable enough to operate successfully. Okay, thank you. Anyone else in the landlord support piece of it? Like, what are you guys seeing, or what are you guys doing? I assume not everyone has a landlord specialist full-time on staff, that it becomes part of a case manager's position to also help the client to get into a unit. Any of the other partners have a full-time person?
I'm sorry, what was the question, Raphael?
For those who haven't spoken yet, if
Oh.
you have a full-time person dedicated just to recruit and support landlords. I will take the silence as a no. Okay. All right. No, again, this is, I mean, for us as a system, there's some groups that have maybe a couple of staff, but there's some groups that it's just, it's just part of the program and it's part of the case management. It's good for us to kind of know that, because I think, as we kind of move forward, looking at landlords as one of our kind of big pillars of our success. We talk about like coordinated entry, HMIS, obviously housing, but landlords being an important piece of our success and making sure we have the resources to support it. All right, I'm going to move on to trying to think of the order in which we should. I mean, what role do you think the CoC can play when we're looking at this specific area around landlords? What role do you think we can play in assuring success or building capacity?
So I think it would be helpful to have, if the CoC leadership could bring some best practices, like what's worked in other parts of the country with similar dynamics. I think there's a big difference, for example, between Wisconsin and California, right? So, but for other similar kind of areas, are there some best practices that can be brought back? Sorry, my words aren't really coming to me this morning.
No, that's a good point. I actually met with a woman from the city of Nashville. She worked for the city, and she started doing this when COVID started, but she oversees her primary responsibility was to recruit landlords for some of the programs that they're funding. They're also the lead agency for the CoC. But I had a really good conversation with her, and I think there's some really good things happening nationally around this specific area. I think communities, especially those communities that have higher rents and more individuals who are experiencing homelessness, it's definitely more challenging in some of those communities. Like even Nashville, she was telling me that the amount of like rent, like percentage wise, how much has increased over the last couple of years. And I think that's just a trend across the entire country. But yeah, I think there's some good best practices we can look at.
Yeah, and I think that's great. So, I mean, understanding that component in relationship to some of the other political issues that come to play, like for housing, doing more advocacy around, the big corporations owning the homes and, helping us as providers to be able to navigate those kinds of things.
Yeah.
And again, my words aren't coming to me this morning, but I mean, I think it's those broader issues. It's politics, it's the national best practices,
Mhm.
it's policy development, it's that kind of stuff. So that when we jump into this, we're not spending a lot of time having to do that research, but understanding where we can avoid mistakes.
Mhm.
I wonder if the COC already has a large scale landlord on the board or involved with the COC. That might give us insights into
Well,
incentives and concerns.
yeah, we have a gentleman, I'm blanking his name now. He was working with us about a year ago and providing us some support. He owns about 1,000 units. Anybody remember that, working with Emily and some of us when we were looking at the eviction prevention funds and how do we best connect with the landlords around that? But he will be, and he's been fairly supportive. I mean, he's someone we can bounce ideas off of. And this is a landlord who, through the work and the meetings we've had with him, he actually implemented a mediate first policy company-wide. He did not know prior to COVID that he could access Mediate Milwaukee for free. And he's like other landlords. I mean, they don't necessarily want to evict folks if they don't have to. So I believe in his contracts, he actually states that he will prefer and has implemented that policy with all of his clients. So, I mean, that's a big step forward as far as like, when you talk about, even the bigger landlords creating some kind of policy around to be able to do some of this, mediation before eviction. But I think there's some opportunities for us to engage some landlords around this discussion.
That it occurs to me, Raphael, in listening to what you were just saying, that part of maybe the incentive package that is offered to landlords who are willing to partner with CoC agencies and work with our staff to house our clients, that what I think a lot of homeowners and property owners struggle with is, and it's a different type of system navigation. It's how do they navigate the city's system and its various departments to tap into all of the resources and support that are available that a lot of landlords don't even know about, to what you just said. And I wonder if, because the city of Milwaukee is the lead agency of the CoC, couldn't there be some effort to put together improved access and maybe in some ways priority access to partnering landlords to know how to navigate through Department of Neighborhood Services, or know where repair and home improvement resources and dollars are within city departments, or like you mentioned, mediation and making sure that they have easier access to those resources. That may be a real tangible thing for a lot of landlords who may be on the fence as to whether they want to engage more deeply with CoC funded agencies and be more active in the CoC itself.
Yeah, no, that's a good point. Tim, I think you probably heard mention, I think Steve mentioned this on the last call or something around the mayor wanting to do kind of an all call to landlords and have a discussion with local landlords around resources that are available within either city government, but also approach it in the sense as far as how they can work with us. We need to still figure out the details, but I think we have an opportunity now, and especially, the work that, the conversations, we're having with the Department of Neighborhood Services and with HACM, I think there's some ideas or some thoughts on how we can better leverage some of these city departments to our benefit, really.
And I think too, part of the challenge is some of the smaller landlords that in many cases are a bit more flexible and sometimes easier to work with. They're getting pushed out of the market. And that was something that surfaced at the public hearing Tuesday that Congresswoman Gwen Moore helped host. That really looked at sort of the big companies and the corporate entities coming in from out of state and buying masses of properties and becoming bigger and bigger. And we see some of that from in-state landlords as well, who start to dominate the market. And I'm wondering, I'm thinking there has to be ways that smaller landlords with support directly from the city, if they're interested in acquiring additional properties, that they don't automatically get pushed out of that that competition for those properties.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, no, that's a great point. I think that gets us to the next thing as far as
support. Can I just jump in? I agree
Mhm.
wholeheartedly with everything you're saying, but the other thing I want to add is that one of the things that smaller landlords, actually probably all landlords, struggle with is conflict among neighbors. So if it's a multi-unit, right? If it's a multi-unit building, there isn't anyone to help them figure out the conflict with the neighbors around noise, around garbage, around whatever it is. So if I'm missing something, help me out here.
Mhm.
Liz, are you saying that that's more true when our clients are part of that mix?
No, I'm saying it's an issue for all landlords.
Yeah.
And I think it would be a support that might make landlords less difficult to work with if they knew they had a resource.
Well, and that for us goes right back to our housing specialists. When we have a conflict that occurs at any of the properties that we're working with and have placed some of our young people, if our young people are some of the people in the mix that's causing conflict, our landlords know they can call our housing specialists. We can't mediate with people we don't know, but we can intervene and assist with those who we are responsible for. And I think they find that helpful.
Right. Well, and I'm guessing your client might actually be the target of conflict from another resident too. It's not just that they're the quote source of it, right?
Yeah. I would say that's more often the case.
Mm-hmm.
But both are true. Both scenarios are true. And we've had some clients, because of more significant mental health challenges, that have presented some problems and have negatively affected some of their neighbors in the same apartment building. And we take that obligation seriously for intervening and trying to resolve that. And again, with master leases and other landlord incentives, we get to avoid eviction by saying, we can't resolve this in any other way. So we agree to move our client and try a different site and a different facility. And that I think landlords appreciate, because it resolves the problem, and then we come in and do any repair that needs to be done. But they also get to avoid an eviction proceeding, which is our goal as well. So
Good.
We need the same for site-based supportive housing. Options for transfer that are viable and quick. Especially when a person's mental health, is unattended, or the available supportive services just don't have the capacity to deal with it in an effective clinical way. So, needing transfer options so that we can avoid eviction for everybody's benefit is very high on our list as well.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. Okay. No, this is good. I want to jump to the next topic. And this has always come up when we're talking about access to housing, but housing choices. Just want to get folks' thoughts on this. and kind of your perspective on what that means for our COC. I think we all know it's important to have options as far as either location, quality, affordability. I know it's, we talk about it, but how important that is, how important is that as we're kind of looking at creating more capacity around building stronger relationships with landlords?
I think we need to keep an eye on the folks that have the most challenging barriers in terms of applying for housing and getting admitted, like folks on the sex offender registry, folks who are undocumented, to just make sure they're not slipping through the cracks. So keeping an eye on them and tracking how that's going, and finding a way to fund options for those folks that aren't likely to enter other housing options funded by public sources.
Mm-hmm. And I think it's just kind of a given, right? This is something that we want this to be part of our strategy, to make sure we have as many choices as possible for our clients. Are we okay with leaving that as is and moving on?
I'm a little bit confused, like what the subsidy part specifically, I guess, like why would we offer housing that's not subsidized? Because like all of these people are low income. I think maybe like neighborhood choice would be important, because it seems like when we do house people, they're all kind of moving to like the same area, which usually aren't. Like, I don't know, it's almost like there's like not really community integration with a lot of the folks that we're housing, and it seems maybe that would be a better priority.
Mhm.
And I think maybe working with landlords and trying to get them involved too is just like making, I guess, housing more accessible in areas that are more like gated from some of our population.
Mhm. I like that. I like the Cody, the neighborhood choices. That concept.
Yeah, I think I would agree. I think what Cody just mentioned is really critical, because we deal with it all the time, that, some of the most accessible units that still exist and we have some access to are in some of the hardest hit parts of our community, and are also some of the most, bordering on substandard housing that is out there. And that's why those units are available. And I think the more we look at housing choice, the more we have to broaden sort of where are landlords and units available, to maximize choices for our clients. Because we've had some clients to say, I can't live in that neighborhood. I'm trying to get out of that neighborhood. And that's unfortunate, because some of the aldermanic districts that I think have the greatest number of foreclosed properties also have the greatest interest in having organizations buy them up and rehab them and make them as subsidized housing opportunities. But those are the neighborhoods that a lot of people just, it's not top of list of where they want to live. So
Mhm.
that's a real dilemma, I think, from a development perspective, but also a housing first, including housing choice as a foundational piece of that. So,
A part of that with LIHTC, with the tax credit program, that is they incentivize most years, the action plan changes every 2 years, but most years they incentivize building in the least invested neighborhoods. So as I don't know why they think that building an affordable housing building is going to suddenly ignite economic development, but sometimes our policies are at odds with what we as providers know is the best method. And so keeping an eye on that WIDA QAP and what incentives they're building in that are in conflict with the goals of the continuum of care and just our consumers and what they want is something that I think is really important that we don't do. And like it or not, site-based supportive housing is the quickest and easiest way to end homelessness for a lot of people all at once. So if we can do things like St. Catherine's on the east side, you know, which Hope House is doing now, that would be great. So just saying policy watch is a good, important thing.
Yeah, that's a great point, Lisa. I mean, they're built, you're saying basically building in distressed communities and not in other areas where, you know, like the Lower East Side or somewhere else in Milwaukee.
Yeah, I think we're really doing our population a disservice when they're saying that they feel safer sleeping on the streets than in their apartment. Like, I don't know what else there is to say about it. Like, we just have to kind of find new places for people to live. And maybe like, and why shouldn't they live in a nice area, you know?
Yep. Okay. Right, I'm going to jump into, and I'm sorry, this is a longer list than I thought it would be as far as discussions. And I said, these are great discussions. But I just want to be able to hit at least each point on what's going on here in Milwaukee, or any of you specifically working on master leasing in your programs. And what are you doing?
I don't think we have any landlords we're working with who haven't been willing to allow us to use master leasing.
Do you say you don't?
We do.
We do, okay.
Yeah.
All right.
Yeah, we're hesitant to move somebody into a unit if it's under a landlord or property owner who wasn't willing to enter into a master lease with us.
Yeah.
So that the organization is at least part of the leaseholder.
Yeah. Yeah. It works better. It works well with the population you're serving.
Oh, absolutely.
Yeah. Any other groups doing master leasing? Good. On the data side, I think this is obviously extremely important, and something that we're going to look into and dig deeper and get some updated information. But I think most of you know, a couple of years ago, through the work of the NOFA work group, did a kind of an analysis of what would it take to house all of our folks within our homelessness system into housing, if it's either permanent supportive housing or rapid rehousing. But it seems like those types of housing that are needed, I think, would need to be kind of looked at again and updated. And so this is kind of why this is in there, but just from that perspective, as far as what type of housing is needed for our CoC, any thoughts around that? Just knowing of what you've been doing or what you can see us kind of pushing for in the next couple of years.
I'll just reiterate Steve's point from the last meeting where he, emphasized pushing for hiring staff with clinical credentials to provide additional support in our existing programs. That's something I'm more interested in.
I know we've also spoken in the past about the fact that developers don't often necessarily understand the need for larger units for larger families.
Mm.
And to something, Lisa, that you mentioned earlier, I think, there is a place for both site-based of varying sizes, types of housing, as well as scattered site. And I think, to really use housing first model, we have to be mindful of some individuals will do very well in a smaller unit in a smaller building. And maybe we've neglected to look at single family homes or duplexes or quadplexes in the mix of apartment buildings and then larger facilities. And, I understand that in developing affordable housing, the scale tends to be larger to make the numbers and the financing work. But I also think for some people, that's just too much of too many people.
Mhm.
And so, akin to how some people don't do well in congregate care, crisis housing or shelters, others don't do well in big facilities. So I think the more mix we have, the better off we're going to be in maximizing both choice and the right setting for each individual.
Mhm.
I think
know.
our family building has 37 units, 2, 3, and 4 bedrooms. And sometimes I say it's like a trauma pinball. It really, a lot of traumatized children, a lot of traumatized families. So you're right, it's not appropriate for everyone. But if we had the security and the services that, were ideal for that setting, it is a great way for people to enter with their families intact into supportive housing and then be able to move on with the voucher after stabilizing for a year or two in the larger setting, in a site-based setting.
Mhm.
But as it is now, it's difficult without an appropriate level of services and security to keep people feeling safe in their environment.
Mhm.
Excuse me, Raphael, is your group just about done?
Yeah, I got like one more, I think, to touch on, and we're maybe 3 minutes. 2 minutes.
Okay, and then just end and come back together, and then I'll close the rooms in about 3 minutes.
Sounds good.
Thank you.
Thanks. Okay, and I know another housing type we've been talking about a lot, especially in the last couple of years, has been the kind of the safe haven type housing for folks, especially that we've seen come through our hotels in the last 2 years. And we have quite a few of them at the Ambassador currently, but I know that's going to be a topic of discussion to how do we best serve that specific population. Okay, so the next thing, affordable, I personally struggle with this, but as far as like calling and naming the type of housing we need in our community, I think the word affordable gets, again, this is just my perspective, but gets broadly brushed kind of citywide for everyone. And I don't necessarily think that's when that becomes part of the term to use is not necessarily used in the sense of how we view it as far as our needs, but just any thoughts on that specific term and how we use that going forward?
It has been said that our community the problem is not that rents are too high, but that wages are too low. And I think that's true to a point. I mean, if the gold standard of affordability is that an individual should not be spending more than 30% of their income and financial resources on housing related costs, that to me is the definition of affordable. And if we look at what the median wages are, particularly for certain members of our community, that should be the baseline for then what are rents that are affordable based on various income levels. And the reality is there aren't a lot of places that have rents that are affordable using that criteria. So I mean, on the one hand, affordable is in the eye of the beholder, but if we use the HUD standard of 30% of resources, well then that should tell us the range of housing and housing costs associated with that, that would make more housing more affordable for more people.
Mm-hmm. Great. And just lastly, I think advocacy, we've kind of touched on advocacy on a lot of these topics up on top. But I think there's something to be said that needs to be an integral part of our work as far as how we create new programs, that we have that focus around making, like I think it was you, Lisa, where you mentioned like if folks are using LIHTC or doing new development, where are these developments happening, and is it the right place to do them?
And what's affordable,
Yeah.
according to the LIHTC program as well,
Yeah.
which incentivizes building to 60% of area median income over building to lower levels of income. So
Mhm.
again, it's a struggle to
Yeah.
operate these properties.
Yep. As far as, I'm going to jump in off soon, but as far as next steps, I think we're looking at, as this group being a key piece of the work that's going to be done moving forward. And if we break up into, whatever we call it, task forces or committees, that we do it, that you will all be involved in this process. And we're asking everyone to participate, because I think we're going to have a lot of work to be done, I think, in the next at least month, so we can get something a little bit more concrete in how we structure this moving forward. So any other thoughts with 35 seconds left? Thank you all. This is a great discussion. We'll go back to the big group.
Welcome back, everyone. I know we don't have time to go over I know I don't, Raphael, that came out of the group that I worked with, but it's very clear that I think we gained a little clarity on what are some of the top priorities, certainly room for the CoC to play in the issues around supportive services, and plenty to continue to work on over the next month. Anything, Raphael?
Yeah, no, this is good. I think we had a great discussion. We almost hit pretty much every area we wanted to. We didn't get to all the questions within that area, but I think some really good discussions on how we could look at some of these priorities and build on it and have more deeper engaged discussions around how we kind of move it forward. So I think when we're looking at this as, let's say funding priorities and what do we put our resource into, I think there's some opportunities to do some of that, because I think a lot of agencies are doing some of this work already. Then how do we, take either, say, best practices or some of those models and kind of replicate it either within the other organizations, but also system-wide. So yeah, it was great discussion. But I think, yeah,
I think similar. There are pockets of things happening around many of the areas that we discussed. And clearly one of the roles for the CoC is to sort of bring that together to make sure folks know what's going on. So we'll continue to work on that. So next steps are that I will work on setting up different opportunities for the groups to get together again, and figure out how to organize the groups and organize meetings to continue discussions and get the information that is needed to make decisions about how priorities will be addressed, whether especially through funding, but also possibly through partnerships or advocacy or other approaches. Anyone have any final words of wisdom, comments that they'd like to share before we close this segment? And of course, we'll be writing up the notes so that everybody can see what happened out of each group. Any any additional comments from anyone? Nothing from Tim? Okay, Tim, sorry to pick on you, but you know.
Well, you should have seen him in our meeting.
Okay, well, that
Yes.
explains.
He's tired. He's.
Stop.
All right, well, thank you, everybody, for your very thoughtful conversations and your willingness to continue to work on planning for the future. So thank you. I'm going to disappear while you finish your meeting. And Claire, if you can just close the recording once you're finished, then I'll close out the meeting. Thanks, folks.
Thanks, Shelley.
Now I'll go have breakfast.
All right. Well, again, thanks, everyone. I think just to give you guys some other quick updates on the state EHH application. We need to, as we've done for the last, I think, couple of years, vote for the officially vote for the city as the lead agency for the state EHH application and being the lead agency for that. So I will entertain, unless someone else wants to do this, entertain a motion for this to vote the city of Milwaukee as a lead agency for the state EHH or ESG application.
So moved.
Wendy, thank you. A second.
I'll second.
Thank you, Carl. Any questions or discussions? And we'll ask everyone, all in favor, signify by saying aye or raising your hand.
Aye.
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 All right.
Aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Okay, motion carries. Thank you, guys. Some other updates. Just to give you a heads up, it's not totally official yet, but the state DECR office is looking at increasing the HAP funding, the HAP funding for the city of Milwaukee. I think I mentioned this at the last meeting that we were looking at possibly, if this were to happen, that we will look at creating a stronger partnership with the Milwaukee Housing Authority. I did get an email this past week of an increase in HAP funding, and again, I haven't gotten the official yet from them, but I'm hoping to get that by next week. But these funds will definitely help us create some capacity to work directly with the Housing Authority and some of the vouchers and providing that case management and housing navigation support. So this is super exciting as far as our future partnership with the Housing Authority. I think they've been extremely, willing to work with us. I know there's some things we need to get through as far as some of the barriers or challenges, but we will definitely get to, I think, a better place as we continue to have those conversations with their team over there. So that's definitely good news for us. Any questions on that?
Raphael, could you give us an update as to our, the status of our CDBG and ESG contracts?
No entitlement award letter yet from HUD.
Any sense of when HUD may issue that?
Couldn't tell you when, but this is around the time we normally get it, but nothing has come through yet.
Okay.
We're already in mid-April. I know.
Second question, I had in my notes that there was a plan of convening this body or a larger group to talk about the home dollars this week, and I'm assuming that now it's Thursday, that's not going to happen. Is there a sense of when we're going to begin to have those conversations? And then I'm also curious about the additional money coming out of Governor Evers' administration and office relative to, I think, the $10 million the city's getting and the county's getting about the same amount. So I'm just wondering where we are relative to some of those conversations.
Yeah, what I would like to do is, as far as the home stuff, I think a plan is to solidify a consultant working potentially with UEDA to help us with the home ERP funds, and we want to get that. My guess is probably by this summer we'll start having those discussions around the plan itself. Other funding sources, what I would like to do is maybe at the next meeting, I could make sure to have Steve there. We can have discussions on how some of those funds can be accessed, or what's the plan for allocating some of those funds. Are you talking specifically the ARPA funds?
Yeah, the funds that were given to the state and that Governor Evers directed.
Oh, yeah.
Milwaukee.
Yeah, though from what I understand, those are specifically for the rental assistance, eviction prevention. But I'll confirm that, and again, I'll put that on the agenda for our meeting in May to talk more details about that.
Mm-hmm. I mean, given the variety of funding sources that are coming to play, I would find it helpful if we could get some sort of written summary of what's coming from where and how much time do we have to use it, and what's the eligible expenses or costs that fit under that funding source, because it just feels like it's hard to track what's out there and then how to be strategic about that. So
yes, that's a good idea. Yeah, we can definitely put something together like that.
okay, thank you.
Yeah, for sure. Dina, do you have any updates or questions for the group? Requests?
I do not. I am processing all of the cost reports that were submitted. I have not verified that each agency has submitted their 2 client files yet, but that is today to verify that. A couple of agencies received emails as to me needing additional items. For the most part, all is well in regards to cost reports. Applications, I do recall receiving items that I needed. I haven't gone through to double check that each agency has submitted the request. As far as updated, the UEI information, the certification that was needed. And I think that was all that was asked of the application portion from the agencies. I do know that I had an email out asking for contact persons per activity. I will double check that as well this weekend. But as we speak, all is well, no complaints. I appreciate everyone working with me to get satisfaction from the state in regards to our site visits. Please keep in mind too that we will be having one with them. I do not know when. But I would definitely, as soon as the email hits my line, I will forward it to you all just to let you know that the state is coming. I do personally have to do site visits of each of the agencies, and it will be similar to as it was this past cycle, requesting for documentation. That questionnaire is going to now be part of our physical site visit moving forward. I'm hoping to have a schedule to everyone to let you know that, the site visit is coming, won't be last minute, just to close out with the state on all that they're asking and how often they ask. But that's it. Anyone have any questions of me?
Hi, Dana.
what-
Do you know when you'll have the amounts for each agency for the 2022, 2023?
I don't, Steve. What I am doing, I'm working with ICA, as well as possibly using some matrix that the state used to determine how much each allocation was going to be. I haven't connected with the state yet. I'm sorry, with ICA. That probably will be next week. And I do believe it's probably going to be like the system performance measures timeframe, just keeping it the same across the board as far as what other are being determined to score and award. Just use the same thing. But I haven't decided yet though, Steve.
Okay, thank you.
You're welcome.
Announcements, just real quick. You guys know the Home for Everyone conference is next month, May 10th and 11th. I mentioned last time that we were going to sponsor 20 attendees from the CoC to attend the conference. So we'll ask for at least one individual from your group to go to the conference. And the easiest way to do this is to email me directly. If you're interested in a ticket for that specific conference, you can go to the website. I don't think as of Tuesday, the agenda is not on the website yet. They're still working on the details of that, but there's some local folks, including our very own Lisa, participating on a panel. But they're hoping to get the agenda up on the website by next week. But if you're interested in attending or having one of those tickets, email me directly. I will send you a code that you would enter into the registration via their website. And you can do that anytime before. I need to have that in by May 4th. So if you can get back to me, actually sooner rather than later would be great. So just email me, I'll send you the code and you can sign up and I'll check you off on my list. I know that Christina also offered everyone a ticket, so that's great. So we had a total of 40 altogether. But I'm going to hold May. Actually, I'm going to ask you all if you can do it prior, because I want to hold, if I have any extra tickets, I want to be able to go back and offer groups an additional ticket. So if you can get back to me at least by the 25th of April.
Raphael, can you tell me if this is best used by someone doing like case management, or is it more about funding or policy? Like, so, I mean, I got a lot of folks I could send, but
Yeah.
I want to make the best use of it.
Yeah, I mean, there's topics historically. I've honestly, I've never been to the conference before. It
Okay,
kind of goes
I'll look
around
at the
entire
agenda
state.
then. Yeah, I'll look at the agenda.
This year, they have been, I guess, from what I understand, it's been historically focused more on development and housing development.
Mhm.
This year, they're, and I'm actually on the planning committee. There's been a push now to do more around topics around homelessness. So that's kind of
Okay.
the direction they're going, but it's like
Okay.
housing development and homelessness.
And could we suggest 2 folks? If we had 2 folks?
I would ask if you suggest one person for now,
Okay,
so that can
got
give
it.
you the code right away for that person, and that person can sign up.
Mhm.
And if I have extra by April 25th, I'll reach out to you guys again to see if we have
Great.
other people that would like to attend.
Thank you. And thanks for the workshops in the chat. Was that clear? Thank you.
Yeah.
Any questions on that? Where all the garbage cans outside are being blown out into the streets. It's extremely windy out there.
Do you know, Raphael, is that 2 full days for the conference or is it a day and a half?
Yes.
Yep.
2
2
full
full
days?
days. Yeah, I'm guessing it may include some meals. I don't know. But
Aren't you part of the planning committee?
yeah, I heard that the CEO of Pathfinder is bringing cookies to share with everybody at the conference.
Nasty rumors.
Yes, that should be a good conference. And I know they'll have information on the website too about parking or discounted parking. They're working with one of the downtown parking structures on a discount for the full day. All right. Any other announcements? Oh, the Housing Authority, and more to come on this. They're going to open up their waiting list. There's Section 8 vouchers. And they reached out to us. Emily and I met with them yesterday to figure out the best way to roll this out. Typically, what the Housing Authority does, they send out a letter to their 6,000 individuals they have on the waiting list. But since they have a homeless preference, they want to make sure that information gets to our folks. So we're putting a plan in place to make that as easy as possible for folks to reach out to us to be able to access those vouchers. There's Emily had an idea about, is Emily on the call?
She's not.
Okay. Creating a special number over at 211 that will go direct to someone there that will specifically discuss these vouchers and how to access them. So more to come on that. We're meeting with them again next week to discuss those details, but that could potentially be, fairly impactful.
I have a quick announcement and just Heartland still has studio apartments available at our 37th Street school project. Those are for those who are 55 and older. It's mainly an independent seniors building. So I'm mainly bringing it up because if you have moderate to lower income seniors that are looking for housing, there are no services available. This is not a supportive housing building, but 37th Street near Lisbon, it's a beautiful new building. So let me know if you have questions. I can get you to the right person.
Great.
I'll be super quick too. I know that everyone is hiring for shelter staff, but I have a super exciting new position funded by a private donor to help us with our domestic violence high risk team and helping us create processes that identify the folks who are at highest risk of being killed. It's a data evaluation measurement type position, which is not what folks are looking for when they come to our website and look at careers. So I wanted to tell this group in case any of you know candidates who would be a great fit for this. It's really someone who has experience with data systems and process improvement. So it's sort of a project manager full-time, and then it might be a data position after that, part-time, after we get the processes in place.
It's exciting. Awesome.
It's super exciting, and we're marrying it with one of our government funders who funds the data part of it now, so that we can make it full-time at least for about a year, maybe a little longer.
Good. So you're searching for that person,
I
right?
am searching, and I've gotten all kinds of folks who have nothing on their resume that say anything about data or process improvement.
Yeah.
And people who have applied to all of our shelter positions repeatedly, and also this position. It's really strange.
Yeah, that's across the board, I think.
Yeah, so
everyone that's coming.
I will send it out to the shelter task force, and if you know folks or networks that might be able to help us identify candidates, feel free to forward it far and wide, but I will be rejecting the folks who say they're looking for something entry level, because this is not it. We know what needs to be done. We need to build capacity, so we've got the time to do it. I've got a director of outcomes and evaluation. I've got a coordinator for the domestic violence high risk team, and I've got me, and together we know what needs to be done. We just can't get to it.
Yep. Okay. Awesome. Any other announcements? Hearing none. Thank you all for today and this conversations. We'll have more next month, but we may be reaching out to you prior to our May meeting to have continued discussions on the planning process. So thanks again. Adios. Happy Easter. Good weekend.
Happy Easter.
Bye, everyone.